I'm honored to be here, and I thank you all for coming. And I would like to take this opportunity to send my first greetings to the people gathered here today, the people of the world, and to the leaders of this nation, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Henry Kissinger, George Bush, George Soros, and Barack Obama. Yes, I did, and howdy, boys. I stand before you today because as a nation, we stand at a precipice and crossroads. And it is the duty of we the people to assure our future and our fate. And I want to make very clear on this day that the U.S. government derives its power from the consent of the governed. That, my friends, is the law of this land. It is in the legislation, so in fact and indeed, the people have the power. And we look at America today, and it is an America where poverty, homelessness, and unemployment are at record levels or reaching record levels nationwide. Today, 44 million Americans across the United States receive food stamps, and that number is historic and record-setting and serves as a telltale sign indicative of the economic plight and struggle of the American people. Yet, Obama has chosen to cut $12 billion from the food stamps program and increase military aid to foreign countries, give tax cuts to the rich, and conduct multiple theater wars, thereby bringing to fruition the project for the New American Century's plan for America in the new century. And conducting 3 wars at once? Well, Obama has now beat Bush and wears the crown of war president. The only kind of change Obama has brought is reducing the wallets of American citizens to dimes, nickels, and pennies. And what remains clear is what is of utmost concern to the U.S. government and the Obama administration, and it is not the needs of the people or the nation at large. By their own actions, it is clear that what is of utmost concern is global military venture. And this push for militarism worldwide comes at the expense of American people who struggle to make ends meet. These funds can be allocated toward education, housing, and programs of social uplift. But what we see is a push for international military action when a record number of Americans struggle to put food on the table to feed their families. There is something very divergent and wrong with this moral logic and picture. And what also must be noted is this push for American military action comes at the expense not only of the American people, but of countless civilians and soldiers. And that includes U.S. soldiers who are exposed to radioactive matter in the form of uranium oxides by the U.S. government's continued use of depleted uranium weapons. And despite international research and findings by doctors and organizations classifying depleted uranium as harmful to human health and the environment, the U.S. government continues to use these radioactive weapons with full knowledge of the facts and implications, and is therefore using these radioactive weapons with full knowledge at the expense of their own soldiers. And what this shows is a lack of care on the part of the U.S. government. And it is care that brings us here today. Bradley Manning, a 23-year-old boy, 22 when he was arrested, has for the last 316 days, for nearly a year, Bradley Manning has been kept in solitary confinement, 23 hours a day, and is only released for 1 hour each day, in which time he is allowed to bathe and exercise, though his exercise is walking shackled in circles in a small recreation area. And widely reported a month ago, Bradley was forced to sleep naked and stand at attention naked outside his cell, which moved Bradley's father to speak out for the first time, and rightfully so. This is his son. Imagine for me now if this is being done to your child. It is unacceptable. The treatment of Bradley Manning is unacceptable and tantamount to torture, and by definition is torture, and therefore is in breach of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the United Nations Convention Against Torture, and international law which prohibits the use of torture. And to clearly Bradley defined torture. Torture, according to the United Nations Convention Against Torture, is any act by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted on a person for such purposes as obtaining from him information or a confession, punishing him for an act he or a third person has committed or is suspected of having committed, or intimidating or coercing him for any reason based on discrimination of any kind. When such pain or suffering is inflicted by or at the instigation of or with the consent or acquiescence of a public official or other person acting in an official capacity. The very definition of what 23-year-old Bradley Manning has been subject to for nearly a year. Mental suffering and mental torture through isolation, degradation, dehumanization, and humiliation. What Bradley Manning is forced to endure is the very definition of cruel and inhumane, degrading treatment and punishment. And his treatment has been decried by Amnesty International and organizations, countries, and individuals the world round. Yet, when asked, Obama plainly stated, "I have actually asked the Pentagon whether or not procedures that have been taken in terms of his confinement are appropriate and are meeting our basic standards. They assured me that they are." Does this man live in an alternative universe? Does he have no conscience? Does he not have a shred of moral decency within him? We are looking at a 23-year-old boy who has been kept locked in solitary confinement for 316 days, 23 hours a day, and has been forced to sleep and stand naked. And he hasn't even been found guilty of a crime. America's worst criminals have not been treated in such a manner. And Obama says his confinement is appropriate and meeting basic standards. This is cruel and unusual punishment and meets the standard for qualifying under international law as torture. And for Obama to act like there is nothing wrong and everything is okay is reprehensible and worthy of condemnation. And so just what exactly is it that has brought this unique treatment allotted from the U.S. military to Bradley Manning? It is alleged that Bradley released classified documents and video. And collectively, what these documents and videos showed was U.S. authorities publicly misrepresented information, failed to investigate hundreds of reports of abuse, torture, rape, and even murder, and gave directives for the killing of civilians. Yes, what Bradley exposed was the true nature, a very brutal and evil reality behind the American military and its actions, and the fact that it was being hidden. Now let's be realistic here. If you were working as a military intelligence analyst and saw this level and degree of atrocity being committed, first-degree murder, rape, and torture, and see the government is aware of it and hiding it, now what do? You go, "Hi guys, I looked into your so-called classified files and saw that you were hiding cases of first-degree murder, torture, and rape." Now, if you were watching a movie and the main character did that, you would go, "Oh my god, that guy's an idiot. He's gonna get killed." Crazy, right? But that is the sad state of the world and the very reality of the world that we are dealing with and must confront and deal with. What Bradley Manning is alleged to have done, supplied classified documents and video on discs to WikiLeaks, who then released the information to the public, was an act of conscience. And it is not an illegality to expose crime, no matter how high it is. And it is not an illegality to bring the unjust to justice, nor should either be treated as a crime. And because there is no safety net, agency, or organization set up to ensure transparency and accountability of government, this cannot then be allowed to jeopardize the life of this 23-year-old boy who is so young. He has his whole life ahead of him. And should it be spent in a box because he was witness to the most heinous crimes of the U.S. military and knew that they needed to be exposed? Bradley Manning is a hero hero and a true patriot to humankind and his country. And that is why there arose and remains such a great clamor of indignation that crossed this globe. And it is our duty to ensure that Bradley Manning is not only no longer harmed, but it is our duty to ensure that Bradley Manning is not jailed for doing the right thing, for being brave enough to expose internal corruption at the highest levels of government. As far as the government, just as the people are tried, held accountable, and condemned for their actions, so too must the government be. And in equal manner then will the government and people walk justly and live under and by the same rule of law. A new day and way must be created. And as per the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, binding on all individual citizens and all agencies of government, the government is not the ruler of the people, but the government is the servant of the people. And as noted in the U.S. Supreme Court in American Communications Association versus Dowd, it is not the function of our government to keep the citizens from falling into error, but it is the function of the citizen to keep the government from falling into error. Citizens of America, it is our duty to rise to this occasion at this juncture in American history, at a time in America where 30% of the homeless population are U.S. war veterans. In America where our students' test scores are at record lows and homelessness and unemployment are at or reaching record highs. And a country nearly bankrupt but pursuing imperialistic goals. And a 23-year-old boy who is a hero is tortured and criminalized and threatened with the death sentence or lifelong imprisonment for exposing the grim reality of the truth. As the people of America, the professed land of liberty and democracy, the land where the people have the directive power, we can no longer allow for these injustices to stand. And what I would like to make clear is the U.S. government, by its choices and actions, which have been expressed and declared for all to see, stands in complete opposition to and is non-representative of the will, hopes, and aspirations of the people. And as the people of America, the professed land of liberty and democracy, the land where the people have the directive power of this nation and its future, and we can no longer allow for these or any injustices to stand. It is our duty. Government that is for the people and by the people is what is needed. And we have the power and the time for it is now. Let's create a new day and way for this nation, its people, and our future. For the sake of the world, for the sake of the future, and for the sake of humanity, the time is now.
Yeah.
Oh.
Free Bradley Manning! Free Bradley Manning! Free Bradley Manning! Free Bradley Manning! Free Bradley Manning!
Let there be 2, 3 many Bradley Manning!